Hey everyone, it's Bethany, and I have been practicing law for 25 years now in business and in securities, and I am a real estate investor, and I have overseen billions of dollars of capital raises across thousands of deals. So I know a thing or two about compliance when raising capital. I almost never talk about ongoing cases, and I never talk about cases involving my clients, but I've had several clients ask me about the Tai Lopez case, and he's not a client of mine, so it's fair game. So the biggest question that I get when asked about the Tai Lopez case is Tai Lopez going to jail? I think the first thing to say there is he might, but probably not as a result of the current SEC complaint that's happening right now. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, exists to protect investors from operators like Tai Lopez and his partners and other people, and they don't usually send people to jail. That would be the Department of Justice, and that is not the complaint we're talking about here. So maybe in the future Tai Lopez goes to jail, but not under this particular complaint. Kind of want to break down the complaint and offer a different perspective than what I've been seeing in all the other videos that I've seen on this very subject, and answer some of my client questions and maybe some of the questions that you have, especially if you're an investor or if you're out raising capital. One big thing to note here in this case is that the SEC did not complain that Tai Lopez and his partners had a lousy business model. They didn't at all, in fact. What Tai Lopez and his partners did could have really been brilliant. What they were doing is they were taking bankrupt companies that weren't cash flowing, that were kind of stuck back in the 90s, like Linens and Things or Radio Shack, companies like that, Pier 1 Imports. And they were trying to pull them into this century and make them into e-commerce businesses. So turn around brands that had nostalgia and that investors might really like. In theory, great idea. In practice and in structure and in execution, they failed. And that's what the SEC is complaining about. The SEC is complaining, one, that they didn't like how they raised the capital, they didn't like the message they were delivering, and they didn't like the way they used the money that they raised. So, big picture here, Tai Lopez and his partners raised over $100 million, and they did it in a couple different ways. So I want to break down the structure, and then I want to talk about what they could have done where this did not have to be the regulatory nightmare that it turned out to be. This actually could have been awesome if it had been executed. And in fact, it could have been awesome if Tai and his partners had just acted like operators and business people instead of like influencers and capital raisers. So let's talk about the business structure itself. The business raised $100 something million, and what they told investors was a couple of things. One is they told investors, hey, you can invest in our company and we're going to go manage all these other currently failing businesses, and we're going to rise them back to life, and we're going to give you all kinds of amazing returns. And they made these really high returns that they offered in two different ways. The first way is a debt instrument. And a lot of people think, oh, it's a debt instrument, it's not a security. False. Note is the first word in the definition of a security, and the SEC then cares about what you're doing. So the note doesn't keep it out of being a security, the SEC cares. What they did was they told people they were going to get somewhere around a 25% annualized return, which is pretty freaking high. And they also said that they were going to get paid monthly. And a couple of the claims that they made in their raise efforts was that they've never missed a payment historically, and that these companies were killing it, crushing it, making a bunch of cash, which doesn't make any sense when you're talking about bankrupt companies. Again, the idea of investing money in otherwise bankrupt companies to turn them around, private equity does it all the time. It's just that turnarounds take time, and therefore there's usually not money out of the gate to pay investors monthly. We'll get back to that in a second. The other thing that they offered was equity investments. They told investors, we're going to give you a preferred return, which just means you're going to get your cut of your money before the operators get paid, and you're going to get that first, and then we're going to do a split, an equity split. They still offered eventually the same returns as the debt instruments. They were just paying it in a different order. Again, no problem. That's fine if everything's disclosed that way and everything actually is executed that way. So let's talk about what they told the investors. First of all, I already told you they said that these businesses were thriving and they were doing great and everything's crushing it, and they acted like salespeople and influencers. They also said investors had the option to invest at the management company level, or they had the option to invest at each individual portfolio company level. Meaning, if you as an investor, you like Radio Shack because it's nostalgic for you and you want your money to go directly to Radio Shack, no problem, we got you. They're going to put it right into Radio Shack. If you like Linens and Things, we'll put it there, and so on and so forth. No problem with doing that if that's what actually had happened. It did not go down that way, guys. What they did was they put money at all these company level businesses, and then they put that money back up into the management company and then reshifted it as it was needed across the multiple companies. So some companies did a little bit better than others, as it happens in portfolio companies all the time. That's pretty normal occurrence. They would not have gotten in trouble had they just told the investors, hey, we're going to use our judgment and our business acumen to decide how this money is allocated to the companies, and we're going to decide how the profits are then distributed to you as the investors. That is not what happened. So let's talk about the structure then, what should have happened. What they should have done is a blind pool fund. All that means is, hey, investors, you're going to invest your money. You're going to trust us as operators to go pick how we pick these companies, to pick how we spend this money, and to generate these returns that we're telling you we're going to give you. If they had just done that, they could have allocated that money any way they wanted to. There's a theme here. The SEC really cares mostly about disclosures. If the investors know the risks they're getting into, they're adults, especially in this case where it was a 506C, which means everybody's accredited. They've already got a fair amount of money. They can probably afford to lose their money. The SEC is not quite that strict on what you do in those situations. The other thing the SEC claims they did was they took a bunch of money in management fees for themselves. So they transferred a bunch of money that they then used for their own personal benefit. Now, again, in theory, that's fine. If you tell your investors, hey, we're going to take a management fee, we're doing a bunch of work, we've got expertise, we're going to take a fee to keep the lights on, to pay ourselves, to pay our staff, no problem. But they did not disclose it to investors, and they just transferred money to personal accounts. That's a big no-no. The SEC says, hey man, you can't do that, right? So again, with the not a bad business model, just really bad structure and really bad execution. The big thing you've probably heard that they did is that the SEC threw out the Ponzi scheme word. Ponzi scheme is really where you're paying your investors back with future investors' money, meaning there's no profit, there's no revenue generated. It's just new investors giving money to old investors. Big no-no, not okay. And this kind of thing happens when the management team will try to get ahead of things by reallocating funds and moving things around. And I think usually people aren't doing this with malice. Usually they do it just because they're trying to even things out. And when profits catch up, we'll make it up to everybody. No problem. They don't mean to screw everybody over. But then it kind of snowballs and it gets out of hand. And then you've got yourself facing down the barrel of a Ponzi scheme because you're just taking money from investors and paying it back to former investors, which sounds really great. And they're getting 25% returns, which is allegedly how they were able to give 25% returns without ever missing a payment. But at some point you stop raising money, those returns stop because there's no actual revenue. So what is the SEC saying? One is they're saying, we don't like what you told investors. We don't like that you told investors that you never missed a payment. We don't like that you told investors that they're going to get 25% annualized return. We don't like that you told investors that these companies were crushing it when in fact they were losing millions of dollars per month. So not allowed to do that, not allowed to lie to investors, right? They don't like that they took management fees without disclosing it to the investors. They don't like that they allocated the money to various companies that the investors didn't agree to put their money into. So where it all came crashing down is around December 2023, there was a secured investor who came in and said, yeah, you know what, we're going to take the whole thing back. We put our money in, our money comes first. It is unclear to me because I have not seen the offering documents that were put out there, whether the investors knew that there was somebody who sat in line ahead of them if things went sideways. But that person that did sit in front of them did come back and take all the companies back, which means there's nothing left for the investors. And so that's when the SEC starts getting these calls from angry investors, right? And that's how these things usually get investigated. So I know a lot of people are out there, they're kind of indicting Tai Lopez and they're saying, this is exactly what we'd expect from somebody who's an influencer the way he is or whatever. But the reality is, again, this is not a bad business model. He could have sought help from people that knew how to do this, and he could have raised money legitimately. He could have told the investors all the things that he was supposed to tell the investors. And this thing could be going on still and be completely successful because it's actually okay to not pay returns for a while, as long as you tell the investors, hey, listen, we're going to turn these companies around. That takes a little bit of time. That's realistic. And then we'll get you some returns later. And this is what we project those returns to be. And then to stay in front of it and keep telling your investors what's going on. They kind of hid a little while and the investors were getting really great rosy reports when things were not going so great. So the big lesson here is 1, do what you say you're going to do. 2, tell the investors what's going on at the first sign of trouble. And 3, do not take new investor money and pay it to old investors. Let the investors know there's trouble. Do not pay returns if you have to, but you've got to put a pause on things when things start going sideways. So what could they have done to do things better? 1, they could have disclosed the fees. 2, they could have said, we're going to do a blind pool fund and we're going to put all these things on the top and we're going to decide how to allocate it, right? And 3, they could have just not paid distributions right away so that they could have time to generate the returns and the profits that they said they were going to make. So what do we think happened here? I personally think that Tai Lopez acted like an influencer and he was all rah, rah, rah. And he just didn't want to tell all the things that weren't so positive because it doesn't fit with his brand. I think, though, that on the topic of whether he'll be okay, America loves a comeback story. He'll probably get slapped with some fines. He may be able to buy his way out of this. I don't know. I don't know him personally. I don't know his financial situation. And I don't know if there's anything that I don't know, right? So it's possible that he could do a comeback and everybody's like, hey, great, we love a comeback story and he's going to be just fine as long as he's selling something that's not securities, selling courses, selling parties at his mansions, all the other things that he likes to sell, whatever cars in his garage that day. Bottom line is Tai Lopez is probably going to be okay, but he may never raise capital again, and that may be for the best. I'll keep track of the story and I'll check back if anything new develops and let you guys know what's going on. If you found value in this and you want to learn how to practice safe sec, like, follow, subscribe.